Hi, it's Elizabeth, and welcome to episode 103 already of Persistence U with Elizabeth. Today is going to be a solo episode, and I will keep it short. I just wanted to give you a quick update and also do a little bit of a recap because we are into a new year, but I just got my statistics back from the company I used to distribute Persistence U, and it was pretty exciting, the growth the podcast has had this year. So I hope you had a wonderful 2022, and I hope you're planning to have an even better 2023. Mine kicked off with my youngest daughter coming to visit, and I nearly had her as a podcast guest because her story of finishing college while being pretty severely dyslexic and then dealing with the trauma of a robbery in the middle of finals, being the victim of a robbery. I don't know, she just is an incredible persister. She really is. And I don't think she always knows it. And she, like so many people with learning disabilities, works so much harder to accomplish what comes easily to some of us. So I was really excited about that, but we ran out of time. What we did do in a very short period of time, today I feel like I've been run over by a truck, is we went horseback riding in Chattanooga. We went with my walking group. We went on a hike with my chiropractor's office and some extra friends, or made some extra friends rather, and saw some things downtown. She got to spend time with some of my new friends and neighbors who I adore. And it was just so much fun because when I envisioned moving here, and I've been here now 16 months, I knew it would take a while to develop community, and it certainly did, no question. And I had a lot of false starts with trying things that I thought would be great in Chattanooga that truly were not my thing. But when you witness your home from the eyes of someone else, I don't mean your home as in your apartment, but you just see it with fresh eyes. And I was so very grateful for the time with her, the time for really deep conversation, the time to just hang out and not have any conversation, the times to annoy one another slightly. That always happens. That's just normal part of life. But boy, was that fun. So I am forever grateful for having that time. And I did not bother to return emails for a few days, and I did not record new episodes, and I just sat in the moment with her, and I am just feeling so pleased about that. So while she was here and we were hanging out, I got that little fun email about the recap, and the podcast is really growing. We're at episode 103. I can tell that you all loved episode 102 with Chad Peavy, because the numbers were wonderful, but he's such a dear person, and it was a shareable episode, and it's clear that that happened. So thank you for that. But in the last year, just so you know, and you're such a huge part of my community here, we have grown more than 50% the podcast. And of course, we've kept up with more than an episode a week, even though I've taken a couple of little breaks between seasons. And we have reached, the Persistence U has reached 37 countries. Of course, there are many, many more countries to go, but that's fun in a year that I haven't, well, actually I did some travel, but it's just exciting. So Persistence U is, of course, primarily listened to in the United States, next Germany, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. So thank you all, wherever you are, thank you for listening. And the episodes, I'm just going to give you the top 5 that you liked the best in order. Number 5 was what happens when a stranger shows up at the home you've known for the first 12 years of life to take you away. If you're B. Bauman, you become a stand-up comedian, of course. Bee lives in Germany, and she was such a fabulous guest. Do go back and listen to Bee's episode, because she is the picture of resilience. She really is somebody who lived in foster care quite happily, unlike so many foster kids that I knew and the work that I've done over the years. She had a wonderful foster home who loved and adored her and gave her the stability she needed. And it surprised her very much when her biological mother, who had extremely unmanaged mental health problems, showed up to pick her up, and suddenly Bee was living in a neighborhood she wouldn't have wanted to travel to. And, living with a whole bunch of siblings who had some resentments toward her, and how she turned that around to become a business owner and frankly, a comedian and just a person that thrives. Give it a listen. I loved having Bee Bauman. Of course, Miracles and Fate on 78, author Ari Schonbrun, and talks about his transformation after surviving 9/11 in Tower 1. That was a fan favorite. Also, that came in at number 4. What can you say about someone who went through some of the worst things, who started the day with many, many, many coworkers, some that he adored and some that did not. He did not, of course, only to wrap up the day being one of a few couple survivors from his particular office, and the raw way that he shares that experience and talks about his misgivings about saving someone he really did not get on with at all in the workplace, because he could have died trying to help her, but it was so worthwhile, and they are the best of friends now. So do give that a listen, if you have not already. One of my favorites, and she is a Chattanoogan also, is when stand-up comedian Kerryn Mills found something funny in her belly. And of course, that something funny was ovarian cancer. She shares some of the signs because that is a silent killer, but she also talks about how it was important to keep her job, which is to keep people laughing. She has a thriving stand-up comedy. Highly recommend you look at her channel on YouTube, but she has a thriving stand-up comedy channel and does a lot of shows all over the country with comedian Leanne Morgan. She's so funny, but humor really helped her stay on track, helped heal her. And she shares some other things that helped, and just a joy. I really very much enjoyed Kerryn Mills. Now, another Kerryn, spelled completely differently, Kerryn. You enjoyed number 2 episode of how Vaughan allowed the loss of her younger sister to help others create her world. And Kerryn really lives in a repurposed world where she lives in Australia. She also does a lot of comedy. She has a farm, actually a rescue farm. And I hope to go to there one day. But she talked about the loss of her sister, who was in her 20s and in an abusive relationship. And Kerryn couldn't extricate her sister from that, couldn't stop the cancer from growing, couldn't get custody of her nephews. And it was a very, very helpless feeling. And she's from a close family. It was soul crushing, but Kerryn went on to make meaning of the situation, and today helps a lot of people with their books, anthologies, at presentations. And she really celebrates other people who make a go of life and reinvent themselves after going through something difficult. So she's sort of my Australian sister from another mister. And apparently you loved episode 61 with Karen Vaughan. Just before that, on March 5th of 2022, you liked the number 1 episode was the truth about happily ever after and the journey of recovery from anything. And so that was my episode that I created when I was going to be out of country, but the movie based on my book is Pieces of Me, Rescuing My Kidnapped Daughters. The movie was adapted and I'm so grateful for it. And it is called Stolen by Their Father, starring the amazing Sarah Drew. And so when I knew I wasn't going to be in town for the release, I went ahead and created a podcast that was a solo episode, and that is the number 1 most popular episode from you all this year. So thank you for that. That was wonderful. So we've had a lot of growth, had more than an episode a week, and I am so very grateful. Now, if you like the podcast, feel free to become my patron, be one of the first, and that gives you extra access to me, my early writing, some one-on-one, not one-on-one, I should say, more access in a meeting to answer your questions. And it's $2 or $5, depending on the membership you choose a month. But also just share the podcast as you've been doing. That really helps. And I thank you just for listening. Huge, huge, huge thing. Someone asked me, well, actually, a podcast I was on a couple of weeks ago, what was the motivation for Persistence U? And I like to remind myself and the audience and listeners such as yourself that the motivation really came from when my own children were kidnapped way back when, pre-internet for the common person. And I experienced such an outpouring of support eventually from people I knew, friends, and people I did not across the globe. And it was a time in a crisis. And you see this a lot with natural disasters, when there's an earthquake, when you have a tornado, when you have a hurricane, something like that. People show up for one another and they drop all the defenses. They don't worry about the political party they belong to. They don't worry about whether or not the person in the same socioeconomic background, the same race, the same sexual orientation, those things, whatever gender pronouns, none of that matters. Human to human, we connect often in our brokenness. And so that has always been the goal of Persistence U, especially during the pandemic, to create a place where you got to experience support and kind of get to know other people and create a community that does focus on what knits us together. Thanks so much. The other, let's see, personal updates, got my exciting certificate from NAMCA, the National Association for Masterminds. It's for doing presentations for colleges. So I'm super excited about that. I got that. Hope I didn't bring that up last week, because if I did, this is a rerun. But I did get my certification, which means that for things like Women's Day, for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, for when colleges have TRIO programs for students whose parents didn't go to college, when they have college orientations, I can be a motivational speaker, now have the certification and have some topics ready. So that's so exciting. It was really nerve-wracking. And I loved Odell Bazell and Stan Pearson, the creators of this program, as well as just the other students. They were pretty fabulous. So all that to be said, I'm very pleased and already am booking talks and just getting started with that process now that I'm trained differently than I was before. Also, got some edits back from my final proofreader for Grounded in Grit, Turn Your Challenges into Superpowers. And so I get to dig into those. And I am so thankful. And then my new friend, who was the podcaster, I got to be with, my friend Chip. And Chip, now that when I'm on with you, I forget the details that I was going to say. But anyway, my friend Chip has a wonderful podcast. I got to be on it last week, and he lives in Chattanooga, it turns out. So anyhow, he is showing me how he records and who edits his stuff. That'll help me with recording my own audiobook if they're small books. So that's something I'm working on. And one fun but ridiculous fact is that I found this great movie theater. This may not seem like much to you, but I'm always inspired by reading other people's stories. I'm inspired by writing, and I'm inspired by movies. You can see on my YouTube channel that I have reviewed movies, but I found a cute little theater a while back, but finally got into it. It's a theater close to my home. It's on a park, historical little park here in Chattanooga, Heritage Park. And inside that park is a historical building where on Thursdays they show free movies, classic movies, as well as some older movies, but that are maybe independently produced. And so maybe not everyone saw them. So the same group of people typically shows up about 10 to 15. And then we get together for Q&A afterward and have snacks and all that. And it's totally free. I have found my heaven. And anyway, so that's been really fun. So my podcast friend, Chip, and I will go together soon, and I'll show him what that's like. Chip has a podcast about feeling at home, wherever you are feeling at home. I'll link to that, his podcast. He does a really good job, and his podcast is brand new, but it's, kind of people telling their stories of what makes them feel at home. So anyway, that's it for now. I hope you have a most gorgeous week. I'm going to be reaching out to some people to interview for Persistence U. Again, always good to see you or hear from you. And I hope your week is fabulous. Thank you for everything and have a terrific weekend as well. Welcome to 2023.